Dear friends, welcome to the second session of the online course on nanotechnology and nanomaterials. Now, first, let us briefly review what we studied during the last session. So, during the last session, we started studying about nanomaterials and nanotechnology. So, briefly, let us go through what we have studied. So, nanotechnology means the designing, manufacturing, and characterization of the materials or components or devices which are made at nanometer scale. And the nanomaterials are the materials which have at least a nanometer scale dimension in at least one of the dimensions. So here the nanometer range means 1 nanometer to 100 nanometers. So if the materials or the components have a size of about 1 nanometer to 100 nanometers, at least in one dimension, they are only termed as nanomaterials. So why these nanomaterials are so important? Because these materials are found to develop unique properties whenever they are converted to a nanoscale. So the reasons for acquiring that phenomenal properties are, namely the first one, the increase in the specific surface area, and the second one, it is called as quantum confinement. So we have discussed about what are these things. Then we have discussed about classification of nanomaterials. So broadly, nanomaterials are classified into two categories, namely fullerenes and organic or inorganic nanomaterials. So fullerenes are a class of allotropes of carbon where a graphene sheet is assumed to be rolled into tubes or halospheres. While nanomaterials, they are classified again into different categories like nanopowders, nanocrystallines, thin films, nanowires, high dense monolithic ceramics, xerozells, aerosols, etc. Now here, based on the size of the materials, so if the materials are the components, if their size is constrained to a nanoscale in one dimension, they form as thin films and they are termed as quantum wells. While the materials or the component size is constrained to a nanoscale in two dimensions, they form as thin wires or tubes, and these are termed as quantum wires. And whenever the components are materials, their size is constrained to nanoscale in three dimensions, then these form as particles or particulates, and these are termed as quantum dots. Then coming to the synthesis of these nanoparticles, so nanoparticles are considered to be synthesized by two approaches, namely the top-down methods and the bottom-up methods. Now in the top-down techniques, we have different types of methods called as ball milling method, physical vapor deposition method, plasma laser vapor deposition method, wire explosion method, or etching or laser ablation method. The basic principle in all these methods is that the bulk structure is converted or crushed into smaller pieces, forming the nanomaterials, required nanomaterials. The second technique, which is called as the bottom-up techniques, they involve or they involve the amalgamation or agglomeration of atom by atom or molecule by a molecule to form a sufficiently large nanomaterial. So few techniques or few methods are co-precipitation method, sol-gel method, chemical vapor deposition method, combustion methods, green synthesis. Now among these two different types of techniques, during the last session, we studied about two important methods, namely the ball mill methods and the physical vapor deposition method. Now in this session, let us try to study about the remaining techniques. So the next technique that we are going to study is the wire explosion method. Now the basic principle here in this method is Joule's heating effect. So we all know that whenever a current is carried by any resistive wire, because of that resistance, during the passage of current, there will be some dissipation of energy taking place. And this dissipated energy usually appears as heat in the material. And we all know that the heat energy generated is given by the famous law I square RT, where I is the current that is flowing through the resistive wire of resistance R for a time t. So more the current that is flowing across the resistance, more will be the heat generated across the wire. Now, if sufficiently large amount of current is made to pass through the wire, a lot of energy is generated, and sometimes this heat generated can fuse that material itself. So this particular principle, it is used in this particular method called as the wire explosion method. So it's also called as electrical explosion of wire method, EEW method. Now, basically the schematic arrangement of this wire explosion method will be as shown in this figure. So it consists of a very large or a very high voltage power source, and this particular voltage or the current, it is connected to the wire, which is to be fused and formed into the nanomaterials through a capacitor, so that in a very short time a very large amount of current can be made to pass through the wire. Now, in order to have a continuous process to take place, there will be a method called as wire supplying unit, through which a continuous wire will be supplied into this vacuum uh, chamber, where the explosion can take place, forming the uh, uh, nanomaterials, required nanomaterials, right? So, so the basic components are the conductive wire, usually taken as about 0.1 millimeters in size in diameter. Typically here gold, aluminum, iron or platinum are used to form the nanomaterials, required nanomaterials. So here we use a capacitor as already discussed. The capacitor discharges a pulse of current of the order of 10 to the power of 4 to 10 to the power of 6 amperes per millimeter square. A very huge current is made to flow through that wire, leading to a very high temperature of the order of nearly 1000 100 thousands of Kelvin. The phenomenon occurs over a short time period, namely ranging from 10 to the power of minus 8 to 10 to the power of minus 5 seconds. So here, whenever the large current is made to flow through this wire, the metal melts and it will be broken into a series of imperfect spheres called as undulites. Now these undulites, again, because of the temperature created there, they get vaporized, and these metal vapors once again create a low resistive path, allowing to a faster current discharge across the electrodes. And this creates an electric arc, and this electric arc turns that vapor into plasma. And this plasma, the arc that is created, it is allowed to expand freely, and it creates what is called as a shock wave to make an explosion. So the shock wave that is created, now it pushes that molten liquid or gaseous form of the plasmatic metal outwards, and this causes the breaking of the circuit, and it ends the process. So after allowing for required time after the explosion, the particles of suitable size are created and they are collected in the collection chamber. So this is how the required nanoparticles are created. Usually metallic nanoparticles are created by this method. Now the advantage of this method is it is quite simple, and of course it can be considered to be inexpensive, and simultaneously a considerably bulk volume of nanomaterials can be prepared with different sizes by this method. While there are some disadvantages of this method, now here the process involves a high explosion. So therefore, it is considered to be somewhat dangerous. And moreover, though we are able to form bulk volume of nanomaterials, uniformly sized particles cannot be obtained by this method. And moreover, alloys cannot be made to turn into nanoparticles in this method. Right? So let us try to view a small video regarding this wire explosion method.
Hi guys, I'm from Quantonics Research Group, and I'm here to explain something about the wire explosion experiment and device we have here. First of all, for this experiment, we pour 400 milliliter deionized water in the container, and we put the lid. We close it to fix that container. We put the container in the device. And as you can see, a silver wire had to go down and dip into the water. I pulled the wire and put it into the container in the special rod. And now, with the container fixed, we had to attach the contacts to apply the voltage, the high voltage we want. We can close the door of the device, and by setting the voltage, the time, and feed rate, we can perform the experiment. The voltage is set to 250 volts. We keep the time at 20 minutes and the feed rate at 2.3 centimeters. The wire is going down with a rate of 2.3 centimeters into the water to be broken into parts and to create nanowires. Now we press the play button, and the high voltage is applied, as you can see in the device. The first spark has been observed in the deionized water, and we have to wait until the 30th one. And now, after the 30th one, the water goes dark, and we can have our nanowires in a range of almost 59 nanometers. Now we can stop the performance, the experiment actually. 30th shot has been reached, and we have almost 59 nanoparticles. But they're not stabilized yet. In order to prevent their aggregation and in order to make them stabilized in the solution, we have to use some surfactant. You can see the solution here. We add the surfactant we pour some to some special container and add some surfactant to the solution. And to complete the stabilization process, we have to put it in the ultrasonic device we have here. and we expect to have the stabilized solution and nanoparticles we desire. After almost 10 minutes, we have our nanoparticles stabilized. We can take the container out, and you can see them, and the solution is stabilized using the surfactant and ultrasonic waves. Thank you guys. Please subscribe to our Quantonics YouTube channel. Bye for now.
So that is a small video about how to make the nanoparticles by the wire explosion method. The next method we are going to discuss is called as the pulse laser deposition method, or it's also called as laser ablation method. Now, the synthesis of nanoparticles by this method is one of the common and versatile methods in the synthesis of thin films of complex oxide heterostructures, semiconductors, and ceramics. Now here, a high power beam laser is used to vaporize the bulk target placed on a holder congruently to a substrate placed in the vacuum chamber. Now here, the chamber is typically at a high vacuum, or it is filled with low pressure with a background gas such as oxygen for deposition of oxides. Now, the operating temperature can be varied from room temperature to the high temperature depending on the experimental procedures. Now, when the laser beam hits the surface of the target in the vacuum or in the required pressure condition, it generates a plasma plume, otherwise called as the laser plume, that is something like a flame, which contains neutrons and the ions. Now, the plume carrying the ablated material, that is the material which is now scrapped away from that bulk material, starts moving along this laser plume, and it gets deposited over the substrate, which is considered to be a cooler region. So in this way, this particular method is suitable to produce what are called as nanomaterials of oxides. Now this similar method, it is also used to produce what are called as the carbon nanotubes. So let us discuss that in the next method, or while discussing about the nanomaterials, carbon nanotubes. So this method, it is also termed as laser ablation method, because we are using laser to ablate, that is to scrap away the required material from the bulk structure and form as nanomaterials deposited over the substrate. Now, in this case also, let us have a look of one video regarding this particular method.
Hello science enthusiasts! You are watching a Captain Corrosion video about pulsed laser deposition, where you will learn the basics of this technique and how different deposition parameters affect the process. So let's start with the basics. Pulsed laser deposition is a physical vapor deposition technique that allows synthesizing thin films of a variety of materials. In pulsed laser deposition, electromagnetic radiation from a high-intensity pulsed laser is used as an energy source to evaporate a solid or liquid starting material, which is called a target. This laser is aimed at the target material, where the beam interacts with the surface and creates a luminous plasma plume. The plume itself consists of atoms, molecules, ions, and electrons, However, in some cases, larger particulates and molten globules of material can be ejected from the target during evaporation. Some of the extracted material is then deposited on the groved substrate, forming a uniform film that has the desired composition, structure, roughness and thickness. The deposition process is carried out either in a vacuum or at a low gas pressure environment, which is achieved with the help of vacuum pumps and vacuum gauges that are connected to the deposition chamber. A gas environment of the desired pressure and composition can be created inside the chamber to tune the properties of the deposited films. Most importantly, however, the thickness, crystallinity, roughness, composition and other properties of the deposited film depend on the parameters used for carrying out the process. For instance, the amount of deposited material per surface area unit obviously depends on the distance between the target and the substrate. If the distance is greater, then less material is deposited. However, the film might also have a higher quality, as the energetic properties of evaporated material reaching the groved substrate often show optimum or sweet spot where the growth of high quality film is encouraged. The intensity, wavelength and length of the laser pulses also have a significant effect on the excitation mechanism that takes place on the target surface. For instance, using a laser with short pulses, shorter than 1 picosecond, electrostatic ablation occurs, in which case the electrons that hold the material together are excited so fast that they leave the material, resulting in an explosion of the small amount of target surface. When nanosecond or longer laser pulses are used, then the electronic excitations have time to relax, and the energy is transferred to lattice vibrations of the target. This is causing a fast heating of the surface and evaporation of the target material, which is called the thermal ablation mechanism. If longer pulses are used, then most of the impinging laser pulse is absorbed by the plasma plume, which further energizes the freshly created plasma. In either case, the interaction of laser pulse and the target material results in highly energetic plasma plume, which is directed away from the target surface. It should also be noted that only a small amount of matter from the very top layer of the target is excited and extracted during each pulse. This means that the deposition process is rather slow, but on the other hand, it also allows obtaining films that have a very high quality. In addition, this enables fine control over the thickness of the growing film. The pulsed laser deposition process can be carried out in various gas environments at different pressures. This is important because the pressure of the gas has a significant effect on the film growth rate, crystallinity and stoichiometry. For instance, the deposition of metal oxides is normally carried out in the presence of oxygen to ensure that enough oxygen is bound to the metal. The deposition of nitrides, on the other hand, should be carried out in the presence of nitrogen. It should also be noted that the kinetic energy of the particles arriving on the groved substrate depends on the pressure of the gas in the chamber. Using background gas reduces the kinetic energy of the particles and allows obtaining films with high crystallinity. At lower pressures, the extracted particles are not slowed down and they hit the substrate with a higher energy. This may cause localized damage and sputtering of the previously deposited film. However, when the gas pressure is too high, then the energy of the atoms arriving on the groved substrate is not high enough to allow the formation of an ordered crystal structure. The resulting film may be with low density and amorphous, which in some cases may be the actual goal. Anyhow, the crystallinity of the grown films also depends strongly on the temperature of the substrate. Films deposited at higher temperatures are normally crystalline, while films made at lower temperatures rather amorphous. Thank you for watching our video about pulsed laser deposition. Students and educators.
So from the video, we have seen that whatever the thin films that are formed over the substrate, they depend on the pressure of the gas that is present within this vacuum chamber, the temperature of the substrate, etc. So either the crystalline form of thin films or the amorphous form of thin films with the oxide form or the nitrate form can be prepared by using this method. Now, so far, whatever the methods that we have discussed, they all come under the technique called as the top-down techniques. So here, in all these cases, the bulk structures are converted into smaller particles called as the nanomaterials. Now, let us come to the next type of technique called as the top-down approach. That is, here in these techniques, the atom by atom or molecule by molecule are amalgamated together to form the nanomaterials of the required size. Now, among them, the one of the important method, it is called as a sol gel method. Now, this is considered to be a versatile method that wherein this method is used to prepare different types of nanomaterials like in the powder form or the clusters or dense ceramic materials like glasses or thin films or nanowires or highly porous materials called as aerosols or xerosels. All type of materials can be prepared by this method. Especially this method is suitable to prepare the glasses, and all these glasses are prepared at a very low temperatures. So that is the importance of this method. Now this method, so this is how the schematic process can be shown in this method. So this method involves different stages wherein at different stages we'll be getting different materials forming like powders, aerosols, xerosels, thin films, etc. Now the basic chemical reactions that are involved are the hydrolysis of a suitable precursor and forming what is called as a sol, a colloidal solution. Then once again dehydrating that sol, we form what is called as a gel, and from that gel we can create the other type of nanomaterials. So let us see the different stages of preparing the nanomaterials in this method. So this method, it is called as a chemical solution method or a wet process method because at the most of the stages, the material, the process is involved with some uh, solvent. So that is the reason it is called as a wet process. So as already said that it is used to make ceramic glasses, thin films, fibers or powders, etc. Now usually this method, it is used to synthesize inorganic metal oxide materials as the nanoparticles, right? So let us see the various stages. So these are the different chemical reactions that are involved during the process. So as already said, there are two important reactions, namely one is called as the hydrolysis and the other one it is called as dehydration, or otherwise it is called as the polycondensation. So usually we take a metal inorganic metal alkoxide. So this is the symbol, or it is the representation for the metal alkoxide, where M stands for any metal like silicon, titanium, aluminium, silver, gold, etc. So an inorganic metal alkoxide precursor is taken. So here the precursor means a material whenever it is mixed with some other component, it forms into a new material called as something like a metal alkoxide material. And that precursor, it is now dispersed in an aqueous solution, usually like water, or if the material is not soluble in the water, then usually a suitable alcohol is used to solve or dissolve that precursor in that material, and this process it is called as the hydrolysis. So this is how the reaction takes place. So if you take silicon alkoxide material mixed with water, then we get silicon hydroxide and some other hydroxide material. Now this silicon hydroxide material, it forms as a colloidal suspension of solid particles in the given solvent. Now here this is called as sol but not as the colloidal solution, because the difference is, in case of the colloidal solution, the dispersed particles will also be exerted with the gravitational force, and that is the reason you are all familiar that like some colloidal solutions like paints, ink, etc., whenever they are allowed without disturbing, then these suspended particles, they settle at the bottom due to the gravitational force. Whereas in this case, they are called as sol, where these dispersed particles, they are not exerted with any gravitational force, but only the van der Waals forces as well as the surface charges are present. Now this all, it is now added with some dehydrating agent to get or to achieve what is called as an amalgamation. So this process of amalgamation, it is called as gelation, so that it forms into what is called as a gel. So here now the silicon hydroxide and the silicon hydroxide, it starts getting amalgamated, forming what is called as silicon oxide material or silicon oxide particles. So the other dehydration reaction can also be expressed as like silicon hydroxide and this silicon alkoxide material, it itself getting reacted, wherein this forming as ROH and the remaining thing forming as the metal oxide nanoparticles. So this process, it is called as dehydration or otherwise called as polycondensation. So here the gel that is formed, it is considered to be having what is called as a continuous network of solid particles that are getting amalgamated together, where the solid is in the discontinuous phase within the liquid continuous phase, right? So this is now called as the gel. So by adding the dehydrating agent to this sol, we are getting what is called as the gel forming. Now when this gel is allowed for a longer time, called as this process, it is called as aging, syneresis occurs. Now here syneresis means the process of contraction of the gel by extraction or expulsion of the liquid from the gel. Thereby polycondensation or polymerization continues and gel transforms into a solid mass with a network structure. So you can see that these getting amalgamated together, forming a network structure. Now the remaining water or the solvent that is present, it is removed by drying the material, and here the drying process can be accompanied by two ways. So when the drying is accompanied under the thermal evaporation, that is by heating to a very large temperature or so, so that the network structure collapses and results as a monolith called as a zero-cell. Now this zero-cell, it is a solid with a very high density and high porosity. So this is how the zero-cell is formed, which is considered to be having a high porosity with a very high density. Now, if the same zero-cell by calcining, that is a process of heating to a very high temperature but less than the melting point, hard and dense ceramic or glass nanomaterials are formed. Whereas, if the same drying is accompanied under supercritical conditions without collapsing the network structure, then aerosols are formed. Now, an aerosol is a network of solid with large porosity and very low density. So this is the aerosol that has been formed, where we can see that it's having a large porosity. Almost it is appearing, because of that large porosity, it is almost appearing as a translucent material. And at the same time, its density is found to be very, very less. So such materials, they are termed as the aerosols. So these are some of the pictures of the aerosols. So the aerosols, so here we can see a very large aerosol that has been formed, where the density, though it is having such a volume, its mass will be very, very less. And here the speciality of these aerosols are that they are highly non-conductive for the heat. So here we can see that whenever a flower is placed over the aerosol, and if it is subjected to some flame, the flower is not getting affected due to this flame. That is, this acts as a very high resistive material for the heat. Like that, there are some more properties for these aerosols. So therefore, when the drying is accomplished by supercritical conditions, thereby without collapsing the network structure, we can form what are called as the aerosols. Apart from that, we can also form other type of materials, like from the sol itself. When a suitable substrate, if it is dipped into that sol, or by spraying that sol onto that substrate, we can form what are called as nanoclusters. And by calcining that nanoclusters on the surface that are coated, we can form what are called as the thin films. Whereas by taking the same sol, by adding some suitable surfactant, amalgamation will take place such that some small clusters of nanoparticles are created, and once again calcining. Calcining means here again heating the substance to a very large temperatures but less than that melting point, forms what are called as nanomaterials in the form of the powders. So therefore, here by using this method, we have seen that we can form very high dense and high porous aerosols, or very high porous low density aerosols, or dense ceramic materials, thin films, powders, or sometimes by using uh, or by drawing this solution through a matrix, we can form into fine nanowires or nanorods. So different types of materials can be processed or can be synthesized by this method. Hence, this method is considered to be a versatile method, and we can observe that during the process, only at the time of this calcining, the materials are heated to a higher temperature. Otherwise, the process, the various steps of the process are undergone at very low temperatures. And mostly it involves some solvent included. So that is the reason this method, it is called as a wet method or a low temperature method. Now coming to the advantages of this method are, now by using this method, pure and homogeneous nanomaterials can be obtained. And the size can also be controlled for these nanomaterials by controlling the polycondensation process. And we can also prepare glasses as well as ceramic materials at low temperatures. The conventional methods in the preparation of glasses and ceramics involve very high temperatures, whereas this method is suitable to synthesize glasses as well as ceramics at low temperatures. And most of the process of the synthesis here, it is undergone at very low temperatures. While there are some disadvantages of this method, they are namely the process time is very high. So it is a time consuming process because it requires to allow the gel to dry, where the solvent that is the solvent that is present, it is required to allow to escape from that gel, or otherwise some other methods are required to be used to expel that solvent that is trapped within that gel. So it is a time consuming process, and in some cases the cost of the precursor are found to be expensive. But otherwise, nowadays in the laboratory, the this method is considered to be a most versatile method to form the uh, nanoparticles. So here also we have a small video to form the nanomaterials. So let us see that video. Right. So this method, it is considered to be a bottom-up approach method. The second method, so these are the various stages of uh, the material in this process. So this is how the sol is prepared, then gelation. After taking the gelation and after drying and grinding, we get powders or the other type of materials. Now the next method, it is called as a chemical vapor deposition method, where here the matter is vaporized, the material is vaporized to form into atoms or molecules, and these are carried through a carrier gas into a reaction chamber or a condensation chamber, where they are cooled and formed into clusters, forming the required nanomaterials. So this method, it is a method wherein the nanomaterials are deposited in the gaseous phase. Now, usually the nanopowders of oxides or carbides of the metals can be prepared by this method during the condensation process. Now, a metal organic precursor is introduced into the hot zone of the reactor, and the precursor is vaporized by heating. So this is heated to a very high temperature. Now, usually a carrier gas is used, like a neon or argon is used to carry these hot atoms or molecules into a condensation chamber, which is maintained at a very low pressure. Now, these hot atoms, while reaching in this condensation chamber, they collide with the cool particles present there, and they start clustering, or they start forming into the small clusters on the suitable substrate placed in the reaction chamber. Now, these clusters are further condensed by using a conveyor belt, so that they are well cooled and are formed or condensed. And by using a scraper, these materials or these clusters are scrapped from that substrate, and we can able to get what are called as the nanomaterials. So the particle size here in this case, it can be controlled by the rate of evaporation and the rate of cluster formation or rate of condensation within this condensation chamber. Now here in this case, this method, it is suitable to produce single phase nanoparticles, or even polyphase nanoparticles can also be prepared by introducing more than two precursor at the front end. So instead of using one precursor here, we can have two precursor chambers where the carrier gas is carried simultaneously from these two precursor into the condensation chamber, thereby mm, one or more phases of nanoparticles can be synthesized by this method. So the advantages of this method are, now this method also yields a very high yield of nanoparticles. Now this method is also suitable to prepare ceramics, and this method is quite useful to prepare single phase or multi-phased nanoparticles by introducing more precursors at the front end. While this particular method is also having some disadvantages. So here it requires a lot of energy to heat the precursors. So a lot of energy is required in this case. Now here, the other gases that are coming out of that condensation chamber, they cause some contamination or they cause some pollution to the environment. So these are some of the disadvantages in this method. So let's also watch a video on this particular method. So these are the different precursors simultaneously made to pass into the vacuum chamber. Right? So this method also categorized as a bottom-up approach method. So these are the different methods of synthesizing the various nanomaterials. So coming to the next topic called as the carbon nanotubes. So already we have discussed that, or we have studied that carbon nanotubes are the other types of nanomaterials. Now, the first carbon nanotube was assumed to be discovered by one of the scientists, namely Sumio Izuma. In his words, I spent so much of time using a microscope and the discovery was inevitable. So he started observing the nano, sorry, so he started observing some carbon material using a TEM, that is tunneling electron microscope, and suddenly he found what are called as the carbon nanotubes. So carbon nanotubes are considered to be one of the forms of allotropic forms of carbon. So we know that carbon exists in different forms like diamond, which is considered to be a strongest material, while the same carbon also exists in the other form called as the graphite, which is considered to be a very smooth material. Normally, in most of the cases, it is also used as a lubricant. In the same way, carbon is also available in the other form called as the fullerenes, or otherwise they are called as the carbon nanostructures. Now, the carbon nanotubes are one of the allotropic forms of carbon and are members of fullerene structure and also called as the buckyballs or buckytubes. The structure of carbon nanotube can be thought of as if a graphene sheet, that is, one atom thick honeycomb structure of carbon atoms in a plane of graphite material, if it is assumed to be rolled into a seamless cylindrical tube, so whatever the structures that are formed are called as the carbon nanotubes, or sometimes they are also considered to have what are called as, namely, the buckyballs. So a graphite is nothing but it can be thought of as the layers of the single planed honeycomb structure of the carbon atoms, and whenever we consider one such layer, that forms what is called as a graphene. And whenever such graphene plane, if it is assumed to be rolled to form some cylinders, then we can form what are called as the carbon nanotubes. Or if the same is taken as a closed structure like spheres, they are called as buckyballs or carbon nano spheres. Now, the types of carbon nanotubes, if they are considered, so as if we have seen that the carbon nanotubes are nothing but the graphene sheet whenever it is assumed to be rolled. Actually, not by rolling the actual graphene sheet, we can form the carbon nanotubes, but the nanotubes are said to be formed as if we assume that if a graphene sheet is rolled into a cylindrical form. So here, whenever a particular graphene sheet is rolled into a seamless cylindrical form such that it forms as a single layer, then that type of carbon nanotubes, they are termed as single-walled carbon nanotubes. Otherwise, if I have the nanotubes formed with the multi-layers of the graphene material rolled into seamless cylinders with one inscribed in the other, then we get what are called as the multi-walled carbon nanotubes. While the multi-walled nanotubes, they are further classified into two categories, namely Russian-Dahl model carbon nanotubes or Prachmet model carbon nanotubes. Now, in case of the Russian model carbon nanotubes, multi-wall nanotubes, the multi-walls, they appear as if we have multi-layers with a concentric, or these layers are said to be formed as a concentric cylinders. So every cylinder has a constant diameter with, and different cylindrical forms are formed with increasing diameters. Whereas in case the Prachmet model of carbon nanotubes, it is said to be obtained by taking a single graphene sheet and rolled as if we roll a newspaper or any paper into multi layers, so that the cross section, if we take, it appears as if it is a spiral form. So the multi-walled carbon nanotubes are available in two forms called as Russian-Dahl model carbon nanotubes or Prachmet model carbon nanotubes. Apart from that, we can also form the carbon nanotubes with what are called as, now in all these cases it is shown that the ends are open, but most of the carbon nanotubes that are formed are having a closed end nanotubes. So in a few cases, we can form what are called as open-ended carbon nanotubes. So these are the different categories of carbon nanotubes according to one category, one classification. Whereas we can also have another type of classification of carbon nanotubes based on what is called as the chirality. So chirality means here how the graphene sheet is said to be rolled. Now, in order to observe this one, let us have a small understanding about what is called as a chiral vector. Now, this forms what is called as a graphene sheet. which is having a honeycomb structure for the graphene. Now, this consists of a carbon ring, a honeycomb structure. So now here this forms one ring and different rings. So each ring is formed by 6 carbon atoms here in this case. So first of all, within a ring, let us name every carbon atom with some number. Say for example, let us call this as the first carbon atom, the second carbon atom, the third one, fourth, fifth, as well as sixth. Now coming to the second or the adjacent ring, now again this can be treated as the first carbon atom, and this is now termed as second, third, fourth, 5 and 6. Or let us take another adjacent ring wherein this forms as the first carbon atom. This is now taken as second, third, 4, 5 and 6. So every carbon atom, depending on the closed structure that is taken, it will be given two names. Like this particular carbon atom, we can consider that either it can be called as the second carbon atom when we consider this particular ring structure, or this can also be called as the sixth carbon atom whenever we consider this particular structure. So whenever we name every carbon atom in this honeycomb structure with the similar names, the carbon atoms with the identical name, like this carbon atom, this carbon atom, this carbon atom, as such, all these carbon atoms are considered to be named as the same number. So all these carbon atoms, they are called as analogous carbon atoms. Now, whenever we consider any one of such analogous carbon atom, from this analogous carbon atom, now we can proceed to adjacent analogous carbon atoms along two directions in this particular plane. Like from this taken as the reference, we can proceed in this direction, or this forms as the another analogous carbon atom, and from the same here we can also proceed to form another analogous carbon atom, right? So these two basic directions within this honeycomb directing to the analogous carbon atoms, they are termed as the basic vectors, usually termed as A1 and A2. Now, by making use of these two basic vectors, we can form what is called as a chiral vector represented by CH, which is represented as NA1 plus MA2, where A1, A2, already we have seen that these represent the basic vectors within this honeycomb structure. These are the two directions actually. And N1 or N and M are some integers. Now, based on the values of this N and M, we can have some a resultant vector. For example, let us say a chiral vector has been formed like 2A1 plus 2A2. Like, let us assume that starting from here as the reference. Now, let us see how we get 2A1, right? So, this forms what is called as 2A1. Now, from here, now let us proceed to 2A2. Sorry, the structure here, it is slightly modified. So let us take the other case, the other place. So starting this as the origin. So let us say we proceed to 2A1. And from there, now let us proceed to 2A2 in the other direction. So, sorry. So this is 2a2. So the resultant vector will be somewhat like this. So this forms what is called as 2a1 plus 2a2 vector. Now let us consider a perpendicular form of this vector. And now let us assume that this particular graphene sheet is said to be rolled in such a way that the perpendicular of this vector forms as the axis of the cylinder. Then whatever the resultant form of the carbon nanotubes that are formed, they are now termed as now arm-chaired nanotubes. Right? Instead, let us take another vector called as CH is equal to some 3a1 where m is equivalent to 0. So if we consider that particular part, now starting from, so let us take the another case. So starting from here, so starting from here, so let us take 3a1. So 3a1 means, so along this direction. So this represents 3a1 vector, CH is equivalent to 3a1. And again, if we take a perpendicular vector to this chiral vector, and if you assume that this graphene sheet is allowed to roll in such a way that this vector, this perpendicular vector forms as the axis of that cylinder, then whatever the nature of the carbon nanotubes that are formed, they are called as zigzag nanotubes. So the reason here is after wounding along along a direction where this axis or this direction becomes the axis of the carbon nanotube, we can observe that the way in which we get the carbon nanotubes are this honeycomb structure appears as if it is having a zigzag form. Whereas if we now try to wound along this direction, then we get what is called as a arm-chaired, a chaired form of this one. So therefore, here, that is the reason this particular type, that is whenever a chiral vector has the values of n and m, where n is equivalent to m, this results in the arm-chaired carbon nanotubes, while when m is equivalent to, sorry, when m is equivalent to 0, we get what are called as zigzag type of carbon nanotubes. Like these particles. So based on the chirality, we can form what are called as either zigzag type of carbon nanotubes or arm-chaired nanotubes, or whenever n is not equivalent to m and where m is not equivalent to 0, then we get the other type of carbon nanotubes called as the chiral nanotubes. So this is the another way of classifying the carbon nanotubes as either zigzag type or arm-chaired carbon nanotubes or chiral nanotubes. So this is how we can see. So whenever m is equivalent to n, then we can see a arm-chaired type of carbon nanotubes. Whereas when m is equivalent to 0, we can observe that we have something like a zigzag type of carbon nanotubes being formed. Whereas here we can see that we have what is called as a chirality, that is the vector is rotated in some other way where m is not equal to m, then in such case whatever the nanotubes that are formed are called as chiral nanotubes. So these are the different classifications of the carbon nanotubes. So in the next class, let us discuss about the various synthesis methods of these carbon nanotubes. Then, so today let us stop the discussion at this stage. So have a happy learning. Thank you.